Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on limited play. I am your host, Caesar the Crowd Pleaser, aka Jedi in game. And today is going to be our last archetype breakdown for the Homecoming format, as we are on the precipice of the release of Dark Frontier, which is set 6 for Eternal. I believe today, actually, I got a potential release date of the 9th, which is next week, late next week. So I am going to do this final archetype breakdown this week. Next week, I will do the Sunset Show for the Homecoming draft series, or draft format. And then hopefully the week after that, when the set has been out for a couple of days, I will do a commons and uncommons set review. We'll see how the time frame goes. I think I'm going to try to put commons and uncommons together and then do a rare and legendary set review, but we'll see. I may break it up into 3, depending on how long it takes, and etc. etc. But yeah, so today, once again, we're going to be breaking down the Relics Matter archetype, which is primarily Aurelian, which is primal, time, shadow, but it can vary into some other colors with a primary core of Feln, which is primary, or I'm sorry, Xenon, which is shadow and time. But first things first, I want to go ahead and mention the YouTube channel. That's EJthePodcast on YouTube. That's right. That's where you can catch all the content I produce, to include draft videos, sealed videos, singleton, special events that come on, things as simple as pack openings, as well as this podcast. So definitely check it out at EJthePodcast. Hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way towards helping me make more content like this. Next, I want to take a moment. I know there's a bunch of spoilers going out, but since we're so close to the release, I want to go ahead and just wait. Plenty of other podcasts are doing all the spoiler discussions and stuff like that. So I want to go ahead and just kind of keep that for the overall set review, so you guys aren't hearing me discuss cards more than once, essentially. But I do want to take a moment to give a shout out to YottaByte. He is one of the original, I believe, Eternal streamers. And he decided, when they were doing the campaign thing on Twitch, where you could spend your influence to purchase campaigns to up drops for your viewers, he decided not to do that. Instead, to save his influence, to then purchase the custom card, or create a card product, or etc. in the store. And he ended up doing it. And it was really awesome how he did it. He ended up making it a thing for the community, which one day, if I end up getting that high, I might end up doing the same thing, or at least making several cards myself and having the community vote on which one they want to make it. But yeah, he ended up doing it to where all his subscribers could submit a card up until a point. I think he did a month-long submission time frame, and then at the end, he set a date. Hey, on this date, everyone come on the stream, and we're gonna do a live tournament. So he ended up putting all the submissions, I think it was like 40-something submissions, into brackets, and it was a single elimination. And everyone on the stream voted as they went, eliminating different card types and things like that, until the point where they made it to the final one. They sent it into Direwolf Digital, and believe it or not, they actually got everything done, balancing, card creation, all that stuff, artwork, in time to release it for set 6. So it's actually going to be in set 6. I know Yoda was saying he was trying to push for it to be a promo card, that way everyone in game could get it, but they did put it at rare. So there's a pretty good chance for everyone to get it. And the card is, don't quote me on the name. I tried to look up real quick before the show, but I couldn't quite find it. But I believe it is Kira the Prodigy. It is a 2/2 for 2 and a green. It is unseen. And long story short, in less text, it's any temporary stats that are put on Kira become permanent. So, for example, Kira is a 2/2 base, right? If you finest hour Kira and she gets a +3/+3 to become a 5/5, she will keep that +3/+3 after the turn ends, or the effect of finest hour wears off. She kind of imagine it like another Kaifus, but it's just putting the abilities directly on her. So obviously, I mean, it kind of coincides a little bit when you use things like Predatory Instinct to give her killer and stuff like that. That is permanent and that stays, but anything temporary, like for example, if you have a secret passage and give her unblockable, deadly, all those things, like anything you give her temporarily, quick draw, there you go, that's a good one. The spell from Shadow that gives a unit +2/+2 in quick draw, or +3/+3 in quick draw, that will remain permanently on Kira. So I think it is a really strong card, especially in aggressive decks. I mean, obviously we're gonna see it in the draft format, but it is rare. So I just wanted to give Yotta a quick shout out. I think it is absolutely phenomenal how he did it, and the fact that Direwolf was able to streamline this and make it happen so quickly. I mean, I guess that's one of the benefits of having a digital card game. You can just put stuff in the card file before it's released instead of having to worry about printing and stuff like that. But all right, guys, that is it for that. Let's go ahead and go into our pack one, pick one. One of our final ones for the homecoming. So I'm gonna go ahead and rush through this pretty quickly. Just because everyone has a pretty decent understanding of the format. I went ahead and cracked the pack open online. Our commons, we have Nocturnal Skyrex, Steady Marshal, Lithrai Memory Keeper, Dark Return, Scaly Gruon, Triggerman, Fishing Dinoc, and Yeti Slowsinger. So as far as the commons go, I'm looking at probably Dinoc is a consideration because it's great in the dinosaur deck, but taking a 5-drop early that may not payoff is kind of risky. Yeti Snowstinger is pretty solid, 2/2 for 2 in an archetype that matters. Yetis are pretty aggressive and great and love a 2-drop. And then you have Dark Return, which is just great, getting back your best unit, or especially one that you modified and stuff like that. Steady Marshal is solid, and so is Triggerman, but they're kind of up there with Fishing Dinoc, where I really don't want to be wasting a first pick on them. Uncommons, we have Gloaming Wisp, which is just fine. Privilege of Rank, which is not really exciting. And then Vara's Choice, which is a 2-cost time shadow slow spell, and it has 2 options. You can either silence an enemy unit and put it into the enemy hand, or silence a unit in the enemy player's hand and they discard it. So Vara's Choice is amazing. This card is awesome. It gets a problemsome unit off the board, and also if it has some special abilities, which typically it does, that's what makes units problem. Rarely is a vanilla unit a problem. It puts it back in their hand, so it bounces, so there's a good tempo swing, and it stops it from being as annoying next time it comes into play because it's silenced. So yeah, that's absolutely phenomenal. But our rare here is Steel Fang Chakram. This is a +4/+0 weapon for 4 and a red, and it has Entomb, draw Steel Fang Chakram from your void. So long story short, you can keep giving any of your units a +4/+0, and every time they die, you get the Chakram back, and you can play it again. This card is absolutely amazing and limited, because it makes even your lonely, let's say, Kasul Diplomats, the 1/1 that silences something, you could slap this on it, and now it's a 5/1 that they have to deal with. It's great on blocking, on defense, and if you just swing, even if they kill it, you're going to trade up most cases, and then bam, you get it back to slap on another unit. So it minimizes or negates the 2-for-1 problem, like if you slap this on a flyer or something. The fact that it only costs 1 red influence makes it extremely easy to splash. So yeah, Steel Fang Chakram is my pick here. Looking forward to doing that draft later. That's gonna be fun. Let's see where the draft takes me. But yeah, I'll take Chakram here. All right, guys, moving into our main topic here, which is going into the Relic Matters deck for the Homecoming format. So this deck is one of the pet decks of another streamer / really good limited Vassant, which is Cassandrith. He's very high on this color combination, and I can understand why. I myself have seen time being fairly open for me in most drafts, even though sometimes I don't always go time. I do later on see it in hindsight that it was open, or I end up splashing time and stuff like that. It's just, you kind of get pretty decent payoffs in pack 2s and 3s. So like people, I don't know. I can't tell you why. I've had some other drafters say otherwise, that like Shadow's been open for them. So, which I have seen that as well. I guess maybe too many people are trying to draft Yetis or something more aggressive. I've done that myself. But so this deck pretty much is based off of, it revolves around 1 card primarily, and some people value this card very highly. Other people, like sometimes I've seen this like picks 10 through 12 in a pack, and it just blows my mind away. But I guess if you only like, this is the only deck that wants this card, and this is Lothrai Courtier. And Courtier is a 0/3 elf mage for 2 Time Shadow, and that's it. So on the surface, not very great. It does some blocking in this format, but not absolutely amazing. I'm really hesitant to have a 0 attack or power blocker, just because they can keep attacking into it with no kind of punishment, you know, or negativity. So it does slow down the game a little bit. The main part is its text box, which says when you play a relic, draw the top power card of your deck. Believe it or not, this is extremely powerful. It cleans up your draws by A, making sure you're never power screwed because you just keep drawing power, and B, it takes the top power card out of your deck, so you have less chances of drawing that power, and thus it's replaced by a spell that actually does something. So gas. So having a turn 2 Courtier in this deck and having it trigger a couple of times is absolutely amazing, because you have an abundance of power and you're just drawing straight gas. It is an extremely powerful card, which should tell you why they ended up making it an 0/3 instead of like a 1/3 or 2/4, etc, etc, etc. So that is the linchpin of the deck. That is really the card that puts this deck together, because it just smooths out your draws and it turns into an engine, which also synergizes with a relic. These two synergize the most, and this is pretty much the two linchpins that if you have this combo, you're kind of in gas for this deck, and that is Pitfall Trap. So it is a little awkward. I will say the Pitfall Trap can be replaced with Curator's Spear later on, but I'll tell you why Pitfall Trap combos so well with Courtier and why it's primarily an Aurelian deck. Pitfall Trap triggers Courtier for 1, right? You pay 1 power to play Lothrai Pitfall Trap. Sometimes you kill a unit, sometimes you don't. It triggers, you get a power, so you're good to go, right? Well, later on in the game, when you, let's say, are at 5, 6, 7 power, and you keep playing relics to trigger Courtier to draw you a power, you can use that power as loot fodder, i.e. you discard it to Pitfall Trap to draw some more gas. So the two cards work really well together to just keep you flowing on power and keep you drawing gas later in the game. It is absolutely backbreaking when you have that combo. There was a game where I had 2 Courtiers in play, so every time I drew or I played a relic, like I just looted the other power away and I still was making power drops. It's absolutely absurd. Like, Courtier and Pitfall Trap make a great combo. Another 2 key cards that go well in this deck are the Relics Matter cards, and I'm going to talk about them really quick before we go into the other things. It's a little off center, but these are kind of like the MVPs for the deck and really make it stand out. So the other one is going to be Akantha's Outrider. This is a 3/3 Elf Serpent for 6/6 and a primal. It has flying and it has pledge. So 6/6, a 3/3 flyer for 6 is a little on the expensive side, but you'll see why it's so important in this deck, which it's still fine. It's still fine if you have to do it. But Akantha's Outrider costs 3 less if you have a relic. So you can potentially rush this out on turn 3. And a 3/3 flyer for 3 is absolutely amazing. It's a huge threat the opponent has to answer, and you're definitely putting them on the clock. So yeah, that's one of the linchpin, or one of the important cards of the deck. The other one is Seasoned Spelunker. Seasoned Spelunker is a 3/3 for 3 Explorer for 1 time, and the text box once again comes into play. It gets a +2/+2 while you have a relic. So if you have a relic, you Pitfall Trap, a Frost Talisman, a egg, Arachnodon egg, anything like that, you're getting a 5/5 for 3 in limited. And if you were on the play, that could be absolutely backbreaking to your opponent. So that's a really good card. But here's the thing. It has an ultimate. You can pay 5 to play a Power Stone. So it feels its own ability. If you happen to play this on 3 or 4 and it's just a 3/3, you can immediately ultimate it the next turn to ramp you 1 more power, and it makes it a 5/5 with haste. So I say 5/5 with haste because it's already in play. There might be chances where you have 8 power laying around and then you end up playing this and activating it, but and playing that Power Stone off it will trigger Courtier. So there's some extra synergy going on there. It's just a really solid card, beefy unit that could make this happen. The thing I also like about this deck is that you want to be primarily Xenon because you want to get Courtier out on turn 2 as much as possible. But the fact that Courtier does draw you extra power means you can kind of either A, skim a little bit on your power sources or your sigils if you have enough Courtiers and relics to trigger it, obviously, or you can also splash an additional color because you're seeing a lot more of your sigils, so you have a higher chance of drawing your tokens and your banners to get your fixing. So primarily this deck, you kind of want to commit a little earlier to it than you would other decks, just because the payoff there is absolutely huge. But at the same time, you don't have to go all in. You don't have to be like 100% the Relic Matters. Every card in the deck synergizes that way. Because there's just so much depth to this deck. There's a lot of cards that could take advantage of this kind of archetype. But like I said, the major linchpin is having at least 2, maybe 3 Courtiers and somewhere between 5 to 7 relics, I would think. And the thing is, there's enough relics in these decks that matter, or in this format that matters, that you're not really going to be hellbent on like taking really crummy relics just to make this synergy happen. So let's go into the relics then. We'll go ahead and go into the relics, and then I'll go back into units, because this is some of the stuff that you're kind of looking to pick up. So a relics, right off the bat, we'll start with a Rakdodon Egg. This one is still fine in the deck, i.e. because it is a great relic on its own, especially if you get it early. It does create a slightly awkward sequencing thing with Courtier, because obviously you end up playing this on turn 3 or 4 to make sure you trigger the Courtier, but it pays off, ends up being well worth the wait, and at the end of the day you get a 4/4 unit for it. The other good thing about it is it does destroy itself, so that is something to consider, but Courtier only triggers on you playing the egg, so it will still get the trigger, even though it might not count for things like Sirocco Glider and Akantha Outrider, as we talk about here in a moment. Next up, this one I'm not too high on, but it does do some serious work, which is Infinite Hourglass. You can pick these up pretty late. I wouldn't really want to take it early, but it is a 1-cost time relic that your units have endurance. And this card it's done some work, especially if you have a bunch of beefy units like flyers or sentinels, because you can crash in there for a sentinel and then it's still back on defense, which is great. It also combos really well with Yetis, and primarily the Jotun Punter, because of the fact that the exhaust or stun effect of it that it does after the Yeti attacks doesn't happen. This negates that. Next up, once again, we have Pitfall Trap. We just talked about dealing 1 damage is relevant. It kills the green spotter, the 2/1 flyer. It kills the Time Monk, the 3/1. It kills scorpions. So it does do some serious work. It kills opposing Trailmakers. There are plenty of X1 units in this format that matter, and Pitfall Trap helps take them out. In most cases, honestly, unless I absolutely need to trigger the power draw, I typically hold on to Pitfall Trap till it can kill a unit as well. But sometimes it's fine to just run out there, deal 1 to the opponent's face, or finish off a unit that might have taken, less than lethal damage in combat. Next up, we have Secret Passage. I like this one over Quill. The Quill is the relic that gives a unit lifesteal, which does come into play. They both mill from the bottom of your deck. I don't know if there's a word for that, but those are typically cards you probably wouldn't be seeing in a limited format anyways. So it's really kind of inconsequential. The Secret Passage is the 1-cost shadow relic that once per turn you may pay 2 to give one of your units unblockable. Sacrifice it at the end of turn. Summon, give one of your units unblockable this turn. So I like Secret Passage. Reason being is you typically don't want to see it early, but if you do, it does trigger Courtier once again. If not, later in the game when you have a bigger unit in play and you have a hard time getting through a stalled board state, you can play this, make it unblockable, swing for free, trigger Courtier, and then the next turn you could just pay 2 to make that same unit unblockable. It will die at the end of turn, but it got 2 major swings in there, which honestly I would probably like to put this on something about 4 power and more, so it could get 8 power in there. If you have like a Scour Stone or a Power Breach, you're getting in there for 10 and triggering more power. So this card can really break a stalemate and finish off your opponent quickly, even if you are losing units. You are also in the colors that has Dark Return, so you can bring those units back. So I like Secret Passage more than Quill. The lifesteal does become relevant sometimes when you're in a race and things like that. But the fact that Secret Passage can get through a stalled board state, I feel like makes it really, really valuable. We have Curator Spear. All right, this is a phenomenal card for this deck because it counts as some of its early removal as well as triggering Lothrai Courtier. Once again, in most cases, Curator Spear will destroy itself, but you are still triggering the power draw off of Courtier. And because Relics Matter, chances are you are going to have another relic in play. So it ends up being a 3-1, which makes it right up there with a Conflag, which is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, I think Curator Spear is something you're going to take highly. I'm okay running 2, maybe 3 in my deck. I mean, you are taking the damage, but it's also typically only killing smaller units, and you are hopefully getting a card off of it with the run of the Courtier. So that's a solid removal spell that you want to take early. It keeps you alive. I like it. I think it's a high pick in this deck. Another fan favorite is Frost Talisman. This is awesome because it stuns a unit, once again keeps you alive for a while. And if you go to the late game, which this deck has no problem getting high power numbers because of, once again, Courtier drawing you extra power, you can get to 7 power to draw a card. Once again, notice I'm not really explaining too many of these cards. The reason being is we've been in this format for a long time. I like to assume that my listeners have a fairly good understanding and familiarity with these cards. Next up, we have Lothrai Hideaway. This card is absolutely phenomenal in this deck because of the fact that it triggers, once again, Courtier like the rest of these relics do, so I'll stop saying it. But it also gives you a body. So you're getting a relic that once per turn, you may pay 3 to give one of your elves a +2/+0. This is important because not only does it make a 2/1 dark elf that it could pump, Courtier is an elf as well. So first, you can pump the 2/1, and when they trade with that, you can then start pumping your Lothrai Courtier that can either get in there and attack or start blocking more effectively. So I think this card is fantastic. It has really great synergy with our deck. Of note, Akanta's Outrider that we talked about earlier is also an elf, and Elvish Swindler, which we'll talk about in a moment, is also an elf. So Lothrai Hideaway is great because it goes with the colors you want to. It triggers Courtier, and then it pumps half of your units in the deck. So it is absolutely a great card that has uses both early game as well as late game. And finally, our last relic. Notice I did not talk about any of the rare or uncommon relics or rare or legendary relics. Sorry, excuse me. Because in most cases, you either A, won't see them, or B, if you do see them, they are so good on their own that you'll probably take them regardless of whether you are on the Relics Matters deck or not. So that's why I didn't really bring them up in this discussion. So our last relic is Porcelain Mask. This is a 2 and a time relic. Your units have Overwhelm, which is relevant, and summon silence a unit in enemy hand. So this card is actually better than it seems. On the surface, it looks like 2 do nothing abilities, but because it is in time, you're going to have a lot of beefy units like Sentinels and Worms and things like that. And the fact that it gives those large units Overwhelm is great because then chump blocking is out of the question. There's nothing worse than when you have a huge, let's say, for example, a 5/6 Power Breed Sentinel, and your opponent can just keep chump blocking for 3 or 4 turns. And so negating 15 points worth of damage with 1/1s and 2/2s while they're still swinging the air, etc. like that. That negates that. The other thing is the summon ability. If you get to play this early, you're able to summon to silence like maybe one of their utility units. Like let's say if they have a Trickster or one of their flyers, or maybe if they picked up a champion, you can silence that, or even just a big unit that has Overwhelm, you can silence. So the initial or the summon effect is actually quite relevant as well. It gets rid of deadly units. That's another one as well. That's probably the biggest way it's used, is because if you're playing it, chances are you have big ground pounders, and silencing a deadly unit is just huge. So this card is great. Obviously, it's better sooner rather than later because they have more cards in their hand and a higher chance of it hitting. It can whiff sometimes, but such is life. But all right, guys, that is the Relics that you want to be looking for this deck. Once again, there aren't really any of them that are super high picks except maybe Hideaway and Pitfall Trap. I think the others are somewhat replaceable. The next up would probably be Curator Spear as a removal. Speaking of removal, let's go ahead and just segue into removal real quick. Things you're looking for, you have Display of Knowledge, which is the Aurelian display, which is absolutely phenomenal. All three modes on this card are completely relevant. It is Display of Knowledge is a uncommon fast spell for 3 time Primal Shadow. And the first mode is put an attacking enemy unit on the bottom of the enemy deck, period. So as we talked about earlier with Secret Passage and Blood Quill, anything at the bottom of your deck is pretty much irrelevant in draft because you really shouldn't be getting there. So that is just straight up remove anything. All it has to do is attack, but in most cases, the unit that is attacking is the problematic one. Next up, you can draw a relic from your deck, which if you have a rare relic or you just need something like a Frost Talisman or the Pitfall Trap to get you there or Secret Passage, this does the trick. It is a fast spell, so you can always do it at the end of your opponent's turn and then play it on your turn so they don't have time to prep for it. Or you can do it on your turn and play it immediately. Those are all common things. So that is a great mode for it. And finally, give one of your units a +2 attack and quick draw. This is permanent. It stays on your unit. This is the least used mode, but I think it's also the least anticipated or played around one. So you can really get there and punish your opponent for just making standard blocks, but essentially getting hit by it. So yeah, I like it. That is a great pickup for the deck, obviously, and there's a good chance you're the only person that wants to be in it. Some other forms of removal real quick, like we talked about, are Curator Spear. There is Feeding Time, which is phenomenal, uncommon removal. And then also we have the typical shadow ones, which is Death Strike, which is 4 power, fast speed, just kill any unit, period, and Annihilate, 2 power, 1 shadow, destroy at fast speed, fast spell speed as well. Destroy any unit with a single faction, which does some work quite well. So that is typically the removal suite. I mean, obviously you have all the standard ones in Primal and Time as well, like Predatory Instincts and Dragon's Breath and stuff like that. But those 5 are pretty much the spell-based ones that just kind of get rid of something, period. Don't require additional units and things like that. So that is what's going on there. All right, guys, moving on to the home stretch. Final part of this is the units. Let's go into some of the things. Sorry. All right, so we have some things that work. Let me see where we want to start. Let's go with the 2 cards that gets you a relic. First up, we have Mesmerizing Moth. It is a 1/2 flyer for 3 in a time. It is an insect, so that is kind of irrelevant, really. I don't think there's any kind of synergies with insects at all. It has flying, and then when you summon it, you create an Ancient Bauble, which is the 1 cost. Once per turn, you pay 1 to gain 1 life. And it pretty much, I mean, it's an okay relic. You're not super stoked about having it. It doesn't break the format or anything like that. But it does give you 2 cards for the price, or for 1, and it does trigger, once again, Relic Matters things. It makes your Spellunker a 5/5. It gives you a target for Consuming Greed, which we'll talk about in a moment. Makes your Akantha Outriders cheaper, and obviously it triggers Courtier. So that's a great pickup for this deck, and you can get them fairly late. I don't think too many people are high on them. So you are in a hurry, like needing the first or second pick this. The other one that makes you a relic pseudo is Elvish Swindler, which we just spoke about. It is a 2/3 elf rogue for 5 double primal. And when you summon it, you play a relic of your choice with cost 2 or less from your deck. Typically, I've seen this in most cases go get a Frost Talisman because you have 5 power. You're 2 turns away, essentially, hopefully, from playing the draw card ability of it. So that always helps. But yeah, it gets you, once again, 2 cards for 1. So it's always a bonus, and it can trigger, etc., etc., etc. I just talked about it with Moth, so I'm not going to go into depth with it again. It could get Pitfall Trap, it could get Frost Talisman, it could get Raktagon Egg. It just does the work, right? So that is absolutely phenomenal. This card is great. It is a 5-drop. You have to keep that in mind so you're not just slamming every single one you get. Typically, I think having 1 in your deck is good enough, but I could see an argument for running 2 if you are that kind of deck. All right, guys. Next up, and the final segue into this is, or portion of this kind of archetype breakdown, is the cards that do something because you have a relic, or at least they pseudo synergize with this. So these cards, once again, like Spellunker and Akanta Outrider, they are modified because you have a relic. Those are the ones that really kind of pay you off. These are the ones that have some good synergy. They're just not as important. The Aurelian unit, because there is a cycle of these, is Tumbling Sloth. So this is one for Aurelian. It is a sloth for 3/4 sloth, for 3 power, 1 Aurelian, 1 time, primal, and shadow. And when you have a relic, it has ambush. So typically it's perfectly all right to just play a 3/4 for 3. That is fine. You have no problem with that. Occasionally when you have an early relic in play, giving this thing ambush does help you get a unit out of it, especially early in the game. They attack with their 2/2 just because people are on autopilot. Most of the time you're able to sneak this guy into play, ambush it, and kill it. So that is relevant. A 3/4 body is a pretty good ambush unit. And the fact that it's only 3 power means you can kind of sneak in their late game as well. It just depends, but you're perfectly okay playing this on turn 3 at regular speed as well. And yeah, you can get these pretty late. It's a curve filler. You're not super excited. You're not slamming these, but they do some work. Next up the curve, we have Consuming Greed. This card was kind of a good discussion point on whether it was good or not, etc., etc. They did modify it. They made it a little bit cheaper, took an influence off of it, and I think made this body smaller to make the summon body larger. So Consuming Greed is a 2/1 Nightmare with flying for 4 and a shadow. And summon, you may sacrifice a relic to play a 6/4 Rust Fiend. And that unit is quite relevant, actually. Typically, you want to use this on throwaway relics, but sometimes you just do it to get it, period. You can, play a spear if there's no good targets for it and then sack it. You can play the Porcelain Mask. Like, long story short, Pitfall Trap. What's the... Arachidonai destroys itself. I'm trying to think. Hideaway is probably a good target for it. If you don't have that many elves in your deck, you can play that, get the 2/2, and then destroy it. To an extent, Frost Talisman, even though I don't really think you want to be doing that. But sometimes you will get the biggest unit on the board or make it hard for your opponent to attack. So yeah, it's pretty relevant. It's a good card to have. I don't think you really want more than 1, maybe 2. Typically, I think 1 is good enough because you aren't going to be destroying too many of your relics to get a 6/4. But yeah, it's a thing. It also works with Pitfall Trap, obviously. So doing damage, kill something, maybe loot once or twice, and then sack it to make a 6/4 seems relevant. Next up, this is a personal favorite of mine, and a lot of people like this card in the format, which is Sirocco Glider. It is a 2/5 Serpent for 4 and a time. And a 2/5 body is absolutely amazing in this format. It blocks so many things and stops aggressive decks, especially in a format where there's so many 3/3 for 3s. But when it has a relic, when you have a relic, it has flying, which makes it great on offense as well because very few flyers can block this thing. So it just gets in there, and it slows down their aggression in the air as well, should need be. So once again, not a slam dunk, but still a solid card. Next up, we have Ancient Excavator. This card is a 4/6 Sentinel for 5 and a double time. So that is a little bit pricey, but right there, a 4/6 for 5 is great stats. It blocks so much, and sometimes it gets in there. But summon, draw a relic from your void. So this synergizes really well with Arachidon Egg. It synergizes with Consuming Greed, and it synergizes with Curator Spear. So the fact that it gives you a good body and it essentially draws you a relevant card from your void makes it a really solid card in this deck. It re-triggers Courtier. You can, once again, like I said, get those synergies going with removal spells and things like that. So it's a pretty solid card. I actually like this card quite a bit, especially like I said, you get Arachidon Egg back. There's a very good chance you can just sneak that into the same turn you play Excavator and get another 4/4 for free, essentially. So yeah, Ancient Excavator is a high pick as well. And lastly, this one is another debatable pick because of the fact that it costs 8. But you have Tunneling Gargantua. It is a 5/5 worm for 8 time primal. It has Killer and Pledge. So Pledge kind of helps a little bit if you get it in your opening hand. But of course, if you draw it third or fourth turn, you're still kind of in trouble. So that's a thing. But it has an extra bit of text where it says add attack and power or attack and health equal to the cost of your highest relic or highest cost relic. So if you have, for example, let's say a ring, right? All the rings are 3 power. The Tunneling Gargantua will come into play as an 8/8. So then the killer becomes really relevant. You're able to kill just about everything on the board, and especially something that matters quite a bit, and still have an 8/8 left over to attack next turn. Of note, it does not have Overwhelm unless you combo it off with your Porcelain Mask, which is a thing, and it makes also a 7/7 Overwhelm. But yeah, this card is tough. I've put 2 in a deck before and honestly not really been happy about it. That being said, I may have not valued Courtier as highly as I do now. So I might have not been able to get to 8 as easily as if you have the Courtier kind of deck built. So you can get to that a little bit easier. That is mainly the big debatable part of it. And then also, you know, is 5/5 killer good enough? And sometimes it is. Like at the very least, it gets rid of a pesky flyer or something like that. So I do think it is it can be quite relevant. It's up to you whether you want to put in your deck. I don't mind picking 1 or 2 and then just putting them on the board initially. And then if I have the time or the deck, then I'll put them in. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Obviously, the standard draft stuff goes into it. You know, your 2/2s, like your Trailmakers and your creeping Nocturnal Creepers and things like that. You still want to have a curve. This was pretty much just the core nuts and bolts of the deck. Things that you're looking for to have in the deck for it to work, etc., etc. The one thing I will say as a slight sidetrack to this is, and I'll go into it a little bit more next week for my Sunset show, but I've come to realize that despite them adding plenty of synergies to the format, I believe that honestly, a lot of these synergies, unless you are just, that deck is just wide open, you're kind of just having a standard good stuff deck with a synergy package inside of it. If I believe could quote Cassandrith, I believe is the one that said it. I do agree, where you're just kind of drafting the best cards as you go, trying to stay open, and then later on when you solidify what deck you are, then you start picking up these little micro synergies that can kind of work out. So it's not like you are the Gunslinger deck or you are the Sentinel deck. It's more like you are an Aurelian deck with some Sentinel synergies or some Elf synergies or something like that. And that typically ends up being the more productive and beneficial way to go about this format. Once again, like I said, I'll go more in depth into that next week as we close out the format with the Sunset show. But yeah, I do think synergies are nice to have, but they're not the end all be all, except maybe for Yetis. Like I think Yetis, you really kind of want to go all in on Yetis to capitalize on the bond effects of Slope Sergeant and the pluses of the War Chief or Chieftain, I think. But anywho, all right, guys, that's going to be it for us today. Hope you enjoyed this format, this podcast, and your own drafts. Like I said, this deck is a lot of fun to play. When you go off, you just kind of go off and feel like you're king of the world. But it is a ton of fun. You can catch me on social media. On Twitter, Patreon, and YouTube, like I mentioned earlier, is EJthePodcast. Definitely throw me a follow or subscription on Twitter and YouTube so you get notified whenever I go live on Twitch, which is up next. Twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. So you can catch me streaming live. Primarily limited, but I do some constructed stuff there as well. Every Monday, Tuesdays, and Saturday mornings, Central US time. We have the Discord is up, so you can catch that in the show notes below. If you want to talk Eternal 24/7, I'm on there all the time checking it. You can catch me on my real life stuff on Instagram at CaesarLebear7, where I post circus stuff, performance stuff, fire poi, some stuff on Eternal and things like that. That's primarily what the EJ the podcast stuff is for. So I keep some of my Eternal stuff typically off of there, and cosplay there. I do cosplay as well. And if you have any personal notes you want to send and don't want to rate or comment on iTunes and all that stuff, you can send me an email directly at EJthePodcast@gmail.com. All right, guys. Well, that's going to put a bow on it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying this content and the stuff on YouTube and my live stream. I am enjoying this, and you supporters are pretty much the reason why I continue to do it. It's always enjoyable to hang out with friends. Thank you guys once again for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night or evening or wherever you're listening to this to. And yeah, until next time, keep on gaming.